Well, I'm still gonna try and get this Hercules engine running in this Earthmaster parts tractor, but I can't even get those two back spark plugs out because of the way that the motor's stuffed in there. I can't even get a wrench in there without getting this hood off. I've got no access, so I gotta take the hood off. Only two screws came out, the rest of them are rusted solid, so I'm gonna grind them off. These spark plugs were rusted in there. Have to use a breaker bar on them to get them out. They got a lot of corrosion on them, even on the electrode, so that would indicate there's probably corrosion in the top end here. It's probably from this exhaust pipe like I was talking about, where snow and ice and water or whatever would go down there and go right into there. So the valves are probably hanging open, and that might be why I'm getting that puff back. Even with the hood off, this last spark plug, I can't get a socket in there. Can't get the universal joint on there. I mean, even this one's a bear to get at, because this engine's in there so differently. This breather tube assembly's in the way, this is in the way, but I could take this air cleaner off, I guess. But actually this one I just found out I was able to put the 3/4 inch right on here on the top of the wrench and get in there, and luckily this one was frozen like the other ones. Just took a felt tip pen and I marked 1, 2, and 3 for the spark plug wires for the first, second, and third cylinder, so that way I can take these all off and not have to worry about if they get mixed up any. I mean, also, I'm making the assumption the firing order is correct right now. If the firing order was off, that would also cause the big explosion out of the muffler and backfire. But we're not going to assume that is the case just yet, because this was a running engine before it was set out to pasture. As I suspected, the valves are probably sticking, and this cylinder seems to have compression, this cylinder seems to have compression, these two seem to have no compression. That kind of would make sense that those would be the two that are stuck, because that's going to be the first stop for any water or melting snow and ice that goes down here into this manifold. It's going to want to go into these two cylinders. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some oil in there and let it soak. Actually, in the past I've used Marvel's mystery oil and it's worked really well. I'm going to see if I have any of that handy. Here's what I got: Marvel mystery oil, top cylinder lubrication, add the oil and gas, and I actually just put this in straight and use a little pump can and through the spark plug holes squirt it in back at this direction here to try and get it so it sits and runs down those open valves and hits those valve stems, hopefully freeze them up. Okay, I let that soak for a while and it came back, and still didn't have compression on those two other cylinders, but I could actually see, I could just see the edges of the two valves, and I could see that this valve on the left here was the one that was sticking open. So I got a screwdriver down in there and gently tapped at it, and actually got it to work free, and now it's working. And now when I crank it, I've got compression out of that cylinder. So now I'm going to try and do that same trick over on this one. This one's going to be a little tougher because that valve on the left is opening and closing. Okay, so it's got to be this valve over here, and that's going to be at an odd angle. Hopefully I can get something in there. The other thing I was able to do is, with the valve stuck wide open, I can actually get the little thin plastic tube off of my lubricant here, right tucked underneath it. I can squirt it, and that's going to run right down that valve stem and help free up that stuck valve. Okay, this valve that I'm working on the right hand side here is really stuck. So what I found was that if I take this Allen wrench, I can actually stick it down in the hole, rotate it so that the foot of the wrench there is sitting on top of the valve, and tap it, and I was able to lightly tap and actually get the valve to go down. The problem is, as soon as I crank the engine, one revolution, the cam comes around, pushes the valve back up, it doesn't want to go back down on its own, so it's still sticking really bad. It's no longer frozen, but it's sticking. So I'm going to keep working at it a few more times, tapping it down, let the engine push it back up, tap it down, and hopefully it'll work free. Well, I still can't get that valve to stop from sticking. So, just for the heck of it, I got 3 cylinders working, or compression in 3 cylinders. I want to see whether or not I can get this thing to start. I'm thinking I'll leave this spark plug out. That way that'll eliminate or help minimize the amount of suction that cylinder is developing, because I really don't want that sucking in on the intake stroke just to be blowing it out the hole there, and then also blowing it out through the open hanging valve. Also, I don't want it igniting and causing that backfiring out of the muffler. This is all theoretical. Getting a little bit of smoke out of the exhaust. That's a good sign. I'm going to turn the fuel back on. Huh. Well, guess I can't do that. Fuel coming out of the carburetor again. That darn float. Alright, I've reinserted the spark plug into that cylinder, but I'm leaving the spark plug wire off. It wants to. Of course, the cylinders are pretty fouled with mystery oil and lubricant right now too. That doesn't help. I'll try again. Ooh, a lot of smoke coming out of the carburetor. It's got to be the intake valve that's sticking on that damn cylinder. So what's happening is on the compression stroke, with that valve open, all the pressure is being blown right back down the carburetor, which can't be good for the other cylinders that are trying to draw. So, yeah, definitely going to have to get that valve situation straightened out before I have any chance of starting this thing. Alright, you put mystery oil in the fuel, mystery oil in the crankcase, mystery oil in the cylinder there, let it soak. Tried cranking it to pump the oil through. With the mystery oil in it, and none of that's working. Valve's still stuck, so I'm gonna have to pull the head if I want to start it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drain the coolant out of here. The coolant that's in here does smell like it's got coolant in it, but it stinks. It's got that really punky, gross smell to it, so I'm gonna drain it out. Looks like the easiest way to drain it is a petcock right here on the bottom of this elbow. Well, talk about a pain in the you-know-what. Boy, talk about a royal pain. The modifications they did to stuff this Hercules engine in this tractor involved cutting out this this part of the, we'll call it almost like a firewall area. Like really hack this out, and by doing that they were just barely able to get the motor in. Alright, that valve's still stuck, so I need to take it out, and the valve cover's behind here, so the carburetor is in the way. And actually, just to make things easier on me, I want to take the manifold out also. So I'm going to pull the manifold. I went to pull the manifold and found out a couple of things. First off, the manifold is cracked. It's actually cracked here, 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 and there. So it's actually, there's two sections of the manifold. There's the intake section here and the exhaust section up here, and it's cast as an assembly. And what's happened is the intake section has broken separate from the exhaust section of the manifold. I don't know how long it's been like that, but anyways, that's a problem that I didn't notice before. Also, I went to slide this off, and I can't take it off as an assembly. I had to disconnect the linkage to the governor here for the right here, this linkage. I had to disconnect this, and then it won't slide out because the bottom of the carburetor hits the frame right here. So I'm going to now take the carburetor off of the manifold, and then I'll be able to take all of the assemblies out. Also, to get to this nut on the manifold over here, this pipe was kind of in the way, even with the universal joint on my socket wrench. So what I did was I dropped out this bolt right here so I could flex this off to the side just enough to get in there and get that out. But nothing's easy on the way this is in there. Alright, nothing's easy on this thing. To get the carburetor down, you loosen these two nuts that were up here. Getting a wrench in there is almost impossible when you do get one in there, because this is in the way, and I haven't taken this out because this other bolt that holds this on is actually completely obstructed by this frame that they chopped up, so it's just crazy. And then I finally moving the nut 15 degrees at a time with a small crescent wrench, I was able to finally open and wrench. I was finally able to get the nuts off, and then I still couldn't drop this down far enough for the studs to clear the manifold because this choke bracket here kept hitting the frame. There's this big piece of angle iron that was welded on here and added on later. So now I finally got the carburetor out. So there's the carburetor. Now I should be able to get this manifold off. Well, it seems like everything is going against me here. This little bracket was in the way, so I had to unbolt that. Now, finally, I think I can get this manifold off. Good news is, looking from the back side of the manifold, those cracks only are at the front there, so that's why this manifold continues to be serviceable, even though it's got those cracks on the front. The engine was still able to run just fine with that manifold. All this oil you see in here is all of my mystery oil that I was dumping down through that cylinder, through the top there, to try and get it to clear out. And you can see the valve stems in there. So now, if I get this cover off, I get a valve spring compressor, I can pop that valve out and clean the valve stem and maybe get it to start working again. But right now, as you can see, it's still hanging. Well, the setup, this cover was tough to get out too because this governor being in the way. If this wasn't here, you could easily take the cover out this way. But of course, this is in the way, which is keeping me from unbolting this. So I was able to wiggle it out, but boy, I'll tell you, it was like working on some kind of a puzzle to figure out which way to move it to avoid hitting these studs on the manifold, on the engine block for the manifold and the governor assembly and all this other junk. Anyways, got it off, and unfortunately don't know if I'm going to be able to get that valve out with a standard valve spring compressor like I used on my Continental engine, because the access doesn't look as good here. It's really tight, and the valve spring compressor that I've seen them use on these L-head engines, it looks completely different. It's actually almost like a fork device, kind of like my fingers here. And it would go in, and I'm guessing that the way it works is you actually would spread it apart and it would compress that spring up. I'm also not sure what kind of keepers they're using on this thing. Looks a little bit different. There's actually a little piece right here that's separate. You can see it moving right there. That little piece right there, that must somehow drop out when you compress the spring. And then, but I'm not sure how the keeper works. So that's about all I could do today.